Hi, welcome to another edition of Newsmakers Journal of the Vaccine Year. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Wednesday, August 25th, and our guest is Representative Salud Carbajal, Congressman who represents the 24th Congressional District. And we were supposed to meet in Santa Barbara, and then you were in Washington, and now you're back in Santa Barbara, I understand. So we missed our face-to-face in any case. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. I just got in at the Santa Barbara airport at 12 o'clock, got up at 4 a.m. in Washington so I could be with you, Jerry.
Yeah, I'll bet that Board of Supervisors job's looking pretty good sometimes now.
Don't remind me.
All right, well, you had to go back to Washington on an urgent basis because of the Speaker called the House back, and there's been this kind of high congressional drama over two bills. One's a $1 trillion bipartisan hard infrastructure bill that the Senate's passed, that a group of moderate Democrats wanted to just vote on and have at it, but the Progressive Caucus wanted to link it to the vote on the $3.5 trillion budget reconciliation package, which includes a lot of the president's agenda and climate change and social welfare programs and so on. I was a little surprised to find that you were not in the Mod Caucus. This bipartisan infrastructure bill is your kind of thing, no? Where were you?
Well, keep in mind, I was part of putting together that infrastructure bill that's bipartisan. What the drama was about, Jerry, is that keep in mind that the House of Representatives has a number of rules, procedural votes that they have to pass to be able to vote on legislation. And the drama was behind this rule that allowed us to eventually vote on the reconciliation budget resolution. It wasn't on the budget resolution, it was just on the procedure initially.
But that will
delay things 24 hours.
But that will ultimately allow it to pass with only Democratic votes, correct?
Yes, and of course, we welcome any other votes.
Right, but there's been this conflict within the Democratic caucus between a group of moderates and the progressives, and the progressives basically don't trust the moderates or the Senate to pass the $3.5 trillion thing, so they want to connect the two. And basically, the Speaker came up, of course, with a resolution, but it just kind of kicks the can to September. So my question is, do you think there should have been just a vote up or down on the $1 trillion bipartisan bill for hard infrastructure?
I believe we have to have a vote, and it's going to happen. Keep in mind that you always have a difference of opinion and difference of perspectives, and those issues get ironed out in our democratic process. Whether it's the Republicans or the Democrats, you always have differing points of views that you got to work through. And this was merely yet another opportunity to reconcile different points of views on this specific infrastructure bill of when does it get voted on. And I think Speaker Pelosi worked with all perspectives and came up with a solution that basically allowed us to move forward with the reconciliation resolution, and also gave a specific timeline by when we're going to be voting on the infrastructure bill.
By September 27th, they're going to be voting on that. But when that was going on, let me try once more. Were you more in the moderate camp, or were you with those left wingers over there?
I would say I was with both of them. I was working with individuals from both sides. I consider myself very pragmatic. I have relationships with many from all perspectives, and I was working with everyone, and I continue to do so.
All right, let me ask you this. Let's start with the infrastructure bill. What's in it for us? What's in it for the 24th Congressional District? Why does it matter?
Well, when you consider our infrastructure that's in great need of repair, our crumbling roads, the infrastructure bill is going to bring significant investments to the Central Coast in terms of being able to invest in our roads, in our bridges, in our waterways, in our broadband. As advanced as we are throughout our country and here on the Central Coast, we still have deserts where we don't have sufficient broadband. I came across a family during this pandemic, that the mother had to drive around her children in a van to get to a place where they could get internet so that they could do their homework. Uh, this infrastructure is going to bring robust investments to modernize our infrastructure, and along the way, Jerry, create jobs, jobs, jobs.
Any specific itemized programs that you can mention in terms of the district?
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's just specifically, there's direct spending that I was able to put forth from our district specifically that would bring about $11 million for the 101 specifically, to continue to work on the expansion, that the last phase of it. It was going to bring an investment to bring about 11 electric buses to the San Luis Obispo area. It was the city of San Luis Obispo. It is going to bring, I believe, about $5 or $6 million as well for to put in a walking path between Cayucos and Morro Bay. These are just a few of the significant specific investments that would be made for this entire region. That doesn't include the money that will come to our local MPOs for our roads, our bridges, waterworks, broadband. But to answer your question, those are just three specific projects that would be built as part of this.
All right, and real quickly, I don't want to get real deep in the weeds here, but give us a sense of 3.5 trillion T with a trillion with a T. We used to be a lot of billions. Now we're into the trillions all the time. But what kinds of things, with some specificity, if you could, would the district see if that bill eventually passes? And I know it's not completely written yet.
Well, it would continue the child tax credit. It would make it permanent. It would invest in our community colleges by making them tuition free. It would expand Medicare to include ear, eye, and dental, which currently is not included in Medicare. It would continue to build on many of the things that we have here on the Central Coast that we want to see expanded. So the child tax credit is a really huge one. And those are the types of things that, in addition to immigration, I think there are a number of immigration policies that likely will be included, and climate action policies that will also be included.
All right, fair enough. Let me ask you about the other issue that's been occupying Washington. And I know you serve on the Armed Services Committee, which is our botched exit from Afghanistan. I guess that seems to be conventional wisdom, or everybody agrees. Do you think that the administration botched the exit?
Well, I think this administration certainly could have done a better execution of the withdrawal. But keep in mind, you got to go back and look at the broad policy evolution here. The previous administration drew down our troops from 10 to 12,000 to 2,500. An agreement was reached with the previous administration to exit and withdraw by May. President Biden said, I'm going to continue that agreement that was reached by President Trump, but he needed to August to actually commence the withdrawal. And certainly there's going to be opportunities to look at why perhaps the execution didn't come out as better planned. I think we're going to be able to look at policies of the previous administration and this administration to see how things could have been done better. But I think at the end of the day, it's about ending a presence in Afghanistan that went beyond the mission that we started 20 years ago to address the threat of Al-Qaeda and to deal with ISIS. Eventually, it became the United States being there, supporting a government in their civil war and causing the lives of many American men and women that were serving there. So I agree with believe it or not, the previous administration and this administration, that we needed to get out. I think the issue is, could we have done it a little bit more effectively?
Yeah, I think we definitely could have done it a little bit more
Absolutely.
effectively with those, astonishing scenes from the Kabul airport. Now, the president has doubled down on this August 31st deadline for getting everybody out, and I know there's some people in the House, Democrats and Republicans, who feel that's a mistake. Our NATO allies feel that's a mistake, Britain and France. There was a briefing on that yesterday, I think. Where are you on that? Do you think that he ought to stick to that deadline?
I'm the vice chair of the 4-country caucus, made up of veterans in the House of Representatives, Republicans and Democrats. We sent a letter to the administration telling President Biden that what should guide our withdrawal date is not an arbitrary date, but the ability to get out all the Americans that need to get out, and all those partners and Afghanis that helped us during our mission in Afghanistan. That's what should dictate when we completely leave and withdraw Afghanistan. Certainly he did double down on his date, but he also said that they are working diplomatically and frantically to get the Taliban to continue to allow the exit of anybody who needs to leave or wants to leave the country. Don't forget that we have much leverage over Afghanistan when you consider all the 90% of their funds are in American institutions, and they're in the process of forming their government, and they're wanting to be perceived and get legitimacy in the world and by the United States is huge for them. So President Biden still has lots of leverage with them, but certainly there is grave concern that deadline could cause a less than orderly, swift and complete evacuation of all Americans and other Afghanis who need to leave the country.
So you disagree with the administration on making that a hard and fast deadline,
Yes.
August 31st?
I did, absolutely.
Okay, all right. Just more broadly, I think a lot of people wonder, well, why didn't we just leave a small force in Afghanistan? Why didn't we keep Bagram Air Force Base? We've been in South Korea for what, 75 years or something. Why not something there? Is the policy really right to just completely abandon the country?
Well, I think there's going to be a Monday night quarterbacking on what's transpired. Should we have done something better or different? But I would tell you, Jerry, at the end of the day, what do you tell the loved ones, the fathers and mothers of American servicemen and women that are there? We kept you there because we needed a little bit of a presence. A 2-decade war that exceeded its initial mission and caused many American lives, and funding, American funding that otherwise could be used for so many domestic programs and needs that we have in our country. I think at the end of the day, we did need to leave. Like I said, notwithstanding how we executed this withdrawal could be re-examined. But I think the one thing I do agree with President Biden is, at the end of the day, as much as I'm disappointed how he executed this, I also understand that leaving a force there, at the end of the day, it's a risk calculation, and a risk calculation to American servicemen and women. What do you tell the parents, the spouses of those service members, their children? Oh, we kept you there a little bit longer, and as a result, we had more loss of life. I think it's a risk calculation that the president made. I disagree with the specific date, but I think that's what was entailed.
But as you just said, one of the purposes of the mission was to get terrorists out of Afghanistan, to stop using it as a base. But now, one of the reasons that the president's arguing for this deadline is you have this group ISIS-K now, which doesn't like the Taliban, and which apparently has made a credible threat to blow up people at the airport and so on. I mean, that part of the mission was clearly a failure. There's still a lot of terrorism, terrorists there.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's the Taliban. I don't know. I'm sure you're aware. At one point, we were concerned that they were harboring and collaborating with Al Qaeda. But for the most part, they are two different entities. The Taliban isn't necessarily allies with Al Qaeda. So they have as much a reason to address those terrorist groups as the United States. So I think we need to make sure that any terrorism does not sprout out in Afghanistan. And I think the Taliban has made statements that they are committed to that. So I wouldn't doubt that that also led to this president's decision.
So you trust the Taliban?
Absolutely not. I think we need to continue to work with them where we can, and where we can't, continue to make sure that we incentivize that as they transition to form their government, that they are providing human rights, that they are providing rights to women, that they don't go back to the old Taliban that we so well know, that abided by Sharia law, and we're not necessarily abiding by the highest standards of human rights.
So what do we do if they thumb their nose at us? I mean, we're going to go back in then? I mean, we don't really have leverage, do we?
Well, Jerry, you forget that we are not the police of the world. I don't think the American people want us to be in every country, putting our men and women at lives at risk to be involved with civil wars all over the world. Certainly when there's genocide or something like that happening, we need to consider all our options, including utilizing our military. But again, for that matter, we would be in China. We would be in other countries that also don't perform or implement the highest ideals and standards of human rights.
Now, once again, Salud, you're proving that you're at bottom an idealist who believes in the perfectibility of man, and I don't share your view. But let's leave that one. Oh, let me ask you one more thing about this, because it's interesting. It's not a lot of money, $6 billion, but it's the kind of policy choices that you're going to have to make. Politico has this story today that there's going to be a quote unquote food fight on armed services about this $6 billion that's basically coming back because we're no longer going to be funding the Afghan government and everything. What should be done with that money? How could that be used, for example, as in a counterterrorism program?
Well, I think we need to look at how we could use that money. But for starters, it could come back. There's so many needs we have currently for our national defense. And certainly there's other worthy projects or programs that we could put that money towards. Certainly, I don't need to tell you that there's also domestic needs that we have that we could use more resources for. So there's always other opportunities to reinvest resources. And if there's going to be a savings from our operations in Afghanistan that are going to sunset, certainly there's other things we could look at.
All right. But you don't think it should be directed, specifically targeted for counterterrorism in that part of the world?
Well, certainly that's one very important consideration that we do need to consider. Again, if there is counterterrorism threats that we need to address, it should be of our highest priority. But we need to look at the totality of needs and priorities.
All right. Let me ask you about something else. You reintroduced with Senator Feinstein and a number of your colleagues this gun safety measure, so-called red flag measure. Does that have any chance of getting through, or any change that you see in the political environment over that issue?
The bill is the Extreme Risk Order Protection Act. And what it does is it allows family members and local law enforcement, when they come across a loved one that is emitting behavior that they're a danger to themselves or to others, to go to the courts and to temporarily take guns away from individuals who are in crisis. This is something that has gotten pretty bipartisan and broad support over the years. And I think within this and next year of this Congress, there's a real possibility that this legislation will be able to move forward.
You better get it done, because you're in your third term, twice in the minority. This is the first time you've been in the majority. It looks like the Democrats are headed for a big wipeout in the 2022 midterms. You agree with that?
Well, I think historically there's some trends that would point to that, but I think when you consider the um, economic relief packages that we were able to move forward on a bipartisan basis, including the American Rescue Plan that Democrats put forward, that put in the child tax credit, that uh, infused investments in local governments, in our local businesses. I think when you consider the fact that Trump is continuing to promote the big lie of the election, the insurrection that happened on January 6th. A few of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle that believe in conspiracy theories, QAnon, and have latched themselves to very discriminatory and racist policies, I think tells me that that trend might have diminished quite a bit, because I think the American people have seen what Democrats have done now that they're in charge, and I think have mitigated a lot of the issues and the challenges that they're concerned about. And when you consider the investments that are yet to come, community college, tuition free, Medicare expansion, universal preschool, the investment in so many areas, I think the American people are going to appreciate all the policies that Democrats have been able to move forward.
But Biden's in free fall in the polls. I mean, he really blew it with this Afghanistan thing. And, you know, the Republicans, let's face it, they spend all their time trying to define the Democratic Party in a way they can reclaim power. The Democrats all want to govern, you know, do legislation and stuff. I just think, you know, the Democrats need to take a lesson from the Republicans in defining, you know, what it is they're doing. And I'm not sure that the message gets out about the kind of legislation that you just referenced, that it really is a Democratic effort, because you have then Republicans who voted against it. They'll stand in their hometown and take credit for it. So I am not as hopeful or optimistic about the Democratic chances in 22 as you sound.
Well, I'm optimistic, and I think those investments will go a long way, and the American people will at the ballot box reaffirm their support of those policies.
Hey, what's the COVID situation back in Washington like? I know you the last time we talked, you were quarantined and you got it. First of all, how are you? Are you okay? Have you had any further symptoms? And then, you know, kind of what's going on there, and do we have the same split in the Congress that we have across the country about the way that people look at this in a political through a political lens?
Well, I think Congress is a microcosm of our country, of course, sentiment. I myself and my wife, who also had COVID, I think have pretty much recovered. My wife was pretty much asymptomatic. I had some symptoms, more on the mild side, but there were a few tough ones. Some aches and some shortness of breath that still creep up every once in a while. But for the most part, I've recovered. In Congress, you know, there's, I think for the most part, Speaker Pelosi put in policies that required masks, face masks. For the most part, I think people abided by that policy. Lately, you've had a few extreme members in Congress that have flagrantly disregarded her policy. Of course, she's dealing with those issues right now. But for the most part, I think people understand that this Delta variant was legitimate and really causing us to really, again, remind Americans to vaccinate those that haven't been vaccinated, and make sure that we're doing all that we can to get beyond this pandemic. President Biden just announced that there's going to be booster shots available, starting with the most vulnerable and those with chronic illnesses in September. And I think that's going to continue to add to us getting beyond this crisis that we've endured now for a good year and a half, if not 2 years.
Hey, let me ask you, you know, you are the great tribune of bipartisanship. Have you reached across the aisle to your colleague Marjorie Taylor Greene?
I think she's, I work in a bipartisan fashion, but she's beyond bipartisan. She's extreme and I, I'm, I don't think mainstream Republicans. I mean, she's way out there, and the challenge is that there's a lot more that think like her that are amongst the ranks of my Republican colleagues in Washington, and it's growing. So again, going back to your, what will the trend look at this coming midterm elections? Well, Marjorie will be front and center with all of those who think like her, who have said discriminatory things about minorities, about the Jewish community, made some ridiculous statements about the Holocaust, believes in QAnon, all these conspiracy theories, is one of the poster members for the big lie that nothing ever happened on June 6th in Washington. And I think she adds to the counter that you were touching on earlier. The American people don't want that to grow in Congress.
And yet we see these polls, 70% of Republicans think that that Trump won the election, that Biden's illegitimate. 70%.
Well, thank God for 70, because those 30 are going to be helpful.
All right. Hey, let me ask you one more thing, because I promised to get you out on time. 4 years ago, the Democratic Party parachuted you in to endorse Kathy Murillo for mayor and helped pull her out of that. You going to do that again?
I'm staying out of the race this time around. Again, I have a good partnership with Mayor Murillo. I know Deborah Schwartz. She's a good family friend and somebody who's very competent and able as well. I know Mr. Joyce. I know too many people running in this for this seat, and I'm just staying out and letting all the residents make a decision of who they want to continue to lead or not as mayor for the city of Santa Barbara.
That's interesting. So you endorsed her for election, but you won't endorse her for re-election.
Like I said, I know too many people that are running, and I've chosen to stay out. And I think this is going to be a decision that I don't want to overly influence in any way. If I can in some way, not influence the electorate of the city of Santa Barbara.
All right, you heard it here first, August 25th. Representative Carbajal says he's staying on the mayor's race. We'll see where we are in October, and then you have to come back and let me hit you with a Coscaroni if you go back on that. Salud Carbajal.
Only if you bring Nick Welsh, I could get in with a Coscaroni. You know, he and I have this ongoing Coscaroni.
That can be arranged. That can be arranged. All right, Salud Carbajal, thank you so much for checking in with Newsmakers and taking the time to speak with us, and stay safe.
Thank you, Jerry.
Take care.